Como ya la vi solita, pues me pregunté qué pasa cuando me bailó cerquita. Eso fue descomunal. Dale, dale, tra, tú sabes cómo es. Vamos a hacerlo, mami, contra la pared. No me dice nada y todo se le ve. El perreo no se acaba hasta las 3. Dale, dale, tra, tú sabes cómo es. Vamos a hacerlo, mami, contra la pared. No me dice nada.
Hola a todos. Hello everyone. Hoy voy a hacer dos dulces para Dia de los Muertos. Today I'm gonna make two sweets for Dia de los Muertos. I'm gonna be making my great Auntie Yo's rainbow jello in a super fun skull mold, and I'm gonna be making pan de muerto. Dia de los Muertos is a holiday that originated in Mexico and it has spread throughout Latin America. Dia de los Muertos is a holiday celebrating friends and family that have passed on. One of the most popular symbols of Dia de los Muertos is the Calaveras, or the skulls. The first recipe I want to make today, though, is a rainbow jello. And I'm going to be making a rainbow jello in this super cool and festive skull mold. The reason I decided I was going to make the rainbow finger jello is because I really want to make a family recipe, because family is a big part of Dia de los Muertos. My great Auntie Yo would always make her famous finger jello for all sorts of potlucks and family gatherings, and if she didn't bring it, people would always ask her, "Where's the rainbow jello?" I did make a couple modifications to my great Auntie Yo's recipe though. I'm going to be using our skull pan instead of the 9x13 pan that she used, and I'm also going to be omitting the lemon jello that she used in her recipe because when I'm using the skull pan, I just don't need as much jello. For a rainbow jello, we're going to need lime jello, cherry jello, orange jello, sweetened condensed milk, and Knox original unflavored gelatin. The first step for a recipe is just going to be to spray our skull pan. And now I'm just going to use a silicone brush just to brush the inside of our mold and get this cooking spray thoroughly coated on our mold so that our jello doesn't stick. To start, we're going to add some cold water, specifically 1 cup of cold water to a small pot in the stove. And the crucial part is we're not going to turn the stove on yet. Now we're just going to sprinkle in our Knox gelatin. Before we turn our heat on, I'm just going to give our water and gelatin mixture just a quick mix to kind of start dissolving it. And then we're just going to cook this on the heat for a little bit until it's completely dissolved, because as you can see right now, there are still a little bit of lumps in there. Now that our water is nice and hot and steaming, I'm just going to go ahead and pour in our orange jello. And now we're just going to mix this until it's dissolved, because as I'm mixing it, I do feel a little bit of grit collecting on the bottom, and we're going to want to basically just dissolve all of that. Our orange jello is going to be the first layer on our rainbow jello, so I'm just using a large cookie scoop right here, and I'm just pouring our orange jello mixture into our mold. And we're just going to want enough jello up to cover the eyes, so I'm basically just going to do maybe around 2 large cookie scoops for each mold, and we are going to have a little bit of jello left over, but that is okay. Now we're going to put our jello in the refrigerator for 20 minutes, and then we're going to start on our next layer. Now we're going to be making our milk jello layer, and we're just going to add in a can of condensed milk into a large glass bowl. Actually, this is more like a medium glass bowl, but anyways, we're just going to add a whole can of sweetened condensed milk into here. Now we're just going to add our hot water into our condensed milk. This is 1 cup of hot water. And we're just going to carefully mix this very thoroughly. I'm back at the stove, and in this pot we have 2 cups of water, and to that I'm going to add 2 packets of Knox gelatin. And again, just like before, we're going to give this a good mix until it dissolves, and because we have 2 whole packets, you can see we have some really large chunks like that, but it will dissolve as soon as the heat turns on. Now that our gelatin is dissolved, I'm just going to go ahead and pour in our milk mixture. And we're just going to give this a good mix. I just took our orange jello out of the refrigerator, and now we're just going to use, again, our large cookie scoop, and I'm just going to scoop our milk mixture into our mold. I just put our Jello into the refrigerator, and now I'm just gonna wait 20 minutes again, and then I'm gonna make our cherry Jello, repeating the same steps I did with our orange Jello.
Baby, para qué te dices y tú solo dices que quieres más, que matemos la curiosidad, eso hacemos y si se nos da, será lo que será, los dos vamos a matar, toda esa curiosidad.
I just took our mold out of the fridge and I filled it up with the cherry Jello that I just made, so back in the fridge for another 20 minutes while we make our lime Jello.
Ni seré el último, pero sé que lo gozaré. Pa' serte sincero, un Dios el que te enseñó lo que puedes hacer conmigo.
I just added another layer of our milk Jello, so we're gonna go ahead and put this back in the refrigerator for another 20 minutes. Alright, our Jello just came out of the fridge, and it's time to finish up our last layer with our lime Jello. I just finished pouring in our lime Jello, so now it's going to go in the refrigerator for the final time, just for a couple of hours, and now we're going to get started on our dead bread. I got my pan de muerto recipe from Rosanna Pansino, and I'll put the link to her video and website in the description down below. We're going to need half a cup of melted butter, 2 large eggs and 2 large egg yolks, a quarter cup of warm milk, a quarter cup of warm water, 3 cups of flour, a quarter teaspoon of salt, 1 packet of instant yeast, a quarter cup of granulated sugar, and the zest of 1 orange. We're going to start by adding our sugar to a large bowl, as well as our yeast, and our warm water. In case you're wondering what warm water is between 120 degrees Fahrenheit and 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And now we're just going to whisk this up. Now that our mixture is fully combined, we're just going to let this sit for a few minutes until we get a thin layer of foam on top. Now while our yeast is doing its thing, we're just going to go ahead and zest 1 entire orange. The surface of our yeast mixture now has a very thin film on it, so that means it's ready to continue on. So we're going to add to that a quarter cup of our warm milk, our melted butter. We're going to add in our eggs as well, and our orange zest. And now we're just going to mix this up thoroughly with a wooden spoon. Now we're going to add about 1/3 of our flour to this. And we're just going to combine our flour together. Now that that's mostly combined, we're just going to sprinkle in our salt. And we're going to mix this all up. And we're going to add in another 1/3 of our flour. And combine it. And we're just going to add in the rest of our flour and mix this up until it is mostly combined. Now we're just going to turn out our dough onto a lightly floured cutting board. Our dough seems really sticky, so I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle some flour on top. This is also going to make sure that our dough doesn't stick to our hands, because like I said, it just looks very watery. But now we're just going to go ahead and kind of start to knead it. Basically what you're going to do is you're just going to fold it over and knead it with the back of your wrist. But like I said, still a little bit watery, so I'm going to pause here because as you can see I already have a little bit of batter on my hand, which is not very good. So we're just going to sprinkle some more flour on and then continue. And we're just going to repeat this until our dough isn't very sticky anymore. Alright, our dough is finished kneading, and the way you can tell is if you touch it lightly, you should feel a slight stickiness, but it should not stick to your finger at all. It should just come away very lightly. Now we're just going to transfer it to a large greased bowl, and we're going to cover it with a towel. Now we're just going to cover our dough with a towel, and we're just going to let it rise for around an hour to an hour and a half. Our dough has risen, so now we're just going to go ahead and flop it out onto our cutting board, just like so. And we're just going to give it a little bit of a shake. And there you can see that it has risen quite a bit. And now we're just going to kind of let it sink down for a little bit. And then we're going to cut it into 10 equal pieces. Now I'm just going to get one of our triangles right here. I'm just going to use our bench scraper to kind of help us grab it. And I'm just going to kind of pull it. And we're going to get it off to the side here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the end of our little triangle off. Now we're just gonna tuck in the sides of our dough just like so. And now that you can see it's starting to form a ball, we're just gonna kind of jiggle it around with our hands. And we're gonna repeat the same process for a smaller ball. Now we're just gonna transfer all of our dough to the baking sheet once it is rolled out into our little balls. Alright, I just finished laying down all of our dough, so now we're just going to go ahead and cover it in a towel again right here, and we're just going to let it rise for around 30 more minutes. Our dough is finally done rising for the last time, so I'm going to show you what we do before baking our dough. We're going to start by grabbing our small ball of dough, and we're just going to make 6 little cuts towards the middle, but we're not going to cut all the way through. Now we're going to brush our large ball of dough with a little bit of water for adhesive. I'm just going to do it 2 times just to make sure it's nice and wet so that our decoration can stick. So now that we just brushed it, we're just going to go ahead and place our decoration on there. And then as you can see, it's not super pretty, but that's because I'm not an artist. And we're just gonna basically use our fingers here carefully just to spread it out and make it flat. And there we go, it's super cute, and we just have our little decoration on there now. And one more step before we put it in the oven, we're just gonna give it a slight bath of egg wash. This was just composed up of 1 large egg, and I also sprinkled in a pinch of salt. And that's just gonna give our little dough a wonderful brown once it's baked. Now we're gonna bake our bread in a 350-degree oven for around 18 minutes. Our pan de muerto just came out of the oven. Some of them are a little misshapen, but that should be solved for the next batch, which I just slightly flattened down. But now I'm just gonna go ahead and start by brushing it with some melted butter. This is just gonna add it a little bit more buttery flavor because there's not a ton of butter in the recipe. And this is just gonna make them super, super decadent and delicious. The final step is to top our pan de muerto with a little bit of sugar. Alright, it's time to try our desserts now. Our pan de muerto finished cooling down, and I also was able to remove our Jello skulls from the mold. The first thing I'm gonna try is one of our Jello skulls, and I'm super excited because I love my great Auntie Yo's recipe for her rainbow Jello. The way I removed the Jello from the mold is I took the mold out of the refrigerator, and then I just used a plastic knife to kind of cut around the sides, and it actually worked pretty well. It did take a while because it was kind of stuck in there, but it actually came out pretty clean, and I think that's because I added plenty of cooking grease. My tip for anyone making this is to make it easier to remove from the mold. Make sure that you have plenty of grease, just like I did, and also make sure that you don't overfill the mold, because I think if you underfill it, it leaves more of a gap and it's easier to remove. I bought my skull mold from Amazon, and it's the Nordic Ware skull pan. Anyways, let's just go ahead and dig into our Jello skull. I'm pretty excited to try it because I haven't had my great Auntie Yo's rainbow Jello probably in like 3 years, so this should be exciting. Wow, I love the texture of my great Auntie Yo's Jello. I just love that it's a little bit firmer than regular Jello because it's finger Jello and just has a really nice mouthfeel to it. And I love all the fruity flavors. It just tastes a little bit artificial, but it just tastes like super fruity and super fun. And I also love the slight creaminess from the condensed milk layer, which I notice is quite sweet, but luckily, I have quite a few of the fruit layers, which are surprisingly less sweet, and I think the creaminess just really balances out the fruit flavors because I think it kind of makes it less artificial tasting. I give our rainbow Jello skulls an 8.5 out of 10. Believe it or not, I actually prefer this to the original recipe because the original recipe has a lot more of the condensed milk layer, and to me, it just tastes way more sweet, surprisingly, so I actually like this better. Now it's time to try our pan de muerto. I just microwaved it in the microwave for around 15 seconds, so it's nice and warm now, and I just can't wait. It just has this wonderfully buttery, sugary, and quite orangey scent to it. It just smells amazing. Let's give it a taste. The scent almost reminds me of orange marmalade and bread combined. First, I gotta start off by saying the texture is amazing. It is super soft, and surprisingly, it is super moist even though I microwaved it. Wow, I just love that. And the flavor is super buttery and super delicious, and I just love the orangey flavor. It is very orangey from all the zest, and it really does remind me of orange marmalade. Wow, it is so good. Wow guys, you definitely gotta try this pan de muerto. It is so amazing. I give our pan de muerto a 9 out of 10. It was amazing. Dia de los Muertos is this coming Monday, so I hope you can make these recipes before Dia de los Muertos, and maybe you can just have a special treat. I just had a really great time making our pan de muerto. It was so fun to make, and I just loved the smell as it was baking. God, it was so amazing, and I love the payout too. They're super delicious. I also really enjoyed making our skulls because it was a very easy recipe. Anyways, that is gonna do it for today. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure if you did to give it a like, and also make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.